The night was silent. Too silent for
Quiet!
Grand Mansion.
Don't make this harder!
That usually buzz with life.
Hand over the
Outside,
child, now.
the
No,
wind
stay
rattled
back!
the windows, carried with a sense of unease, while inside, a soft cry broke through the darkness. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight no one could ignore, a sound of fear, of vulnerability, of a life hanging by a thread. In the dimly lit nursery, the millionaire's newborn lay alone in the cradle, swaddled but restless, the soft wails echoing through the hallways that were otherwise empty. Everyone in the house was asleep, except for one person, the maid. She had worked in the mansion for years, a quiet presence who moved through the rooms with grace and care, never drawing attention to herself. But tonight, her instincts told her something was terribly wrong. The cry of the baby cut through her heart, and without thinking, she rushed to the nursery. Every step she took seemed louder than usual, the polished floors reflecting her hurried movements. She reached the cradle and looked down at the tiny face twisted in discomfort. Her hands shook as she gently lifted the baby, feeling the warmth and fragility of life in her arms. The maid knew the family well, had seen their wealth, their power, and the security that money could buy. But she also knew that money couldn't protect everything. She remembered the stories she had heard about what could happen when the wrong people got close to the mansion, when secrets were left unguarded. Her mind raced. Who could have harmed the baby if she hadn't been there? And why had no one else heard the cries? It was as if the world had turned away for a moment, leaving this helpless child in danger. She wrapped the baby tighter, holding it close, her own heart beating faster than ever. Outside the nursery, shadows moved in ways that didn't belong, shapes that disappeared when she blinked, leaving only a lingering feeling of being watched. The maid's mind spun with questions she couldn't answer. She had always believed her role was simple, to clean, to serve, to stay in the background. But tonight, nothing about her life felt ordinary anymore. As she carried the baby down the long hallway toward a small, hidden room she discovered months ago, a sudden noise froze her in her tracks. A door creaked somewhere in the mansion, soft but deliberate, and the sound sent chills down her spine. Someone was inside, someone who shouldn't be there. Her grip on the baby tightened as she tried to stay calm, whispering soothing words, praying that her presence alone would be enough to protect this fragile life. Every second felt like an eternity. The quiet cry had become a heartbeat of suspense, a signal that danger was near, yet unseen. And as the maid prepared to make a choice that could change everything, a thought struck her. What if she wasn't fast enough? What if the millionaire's newborn wasn't safe, even in her arms? The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, heavier than any task she had ever undertaken. She had no weapons, no allies, only her courage, her intuition, and the unwavering determination to keep this child safe. In that silent mansion, with shadows shifting and secrets waiting to be revealed, one quiet woman held the most precious life in her hands, and no one had yet heard the full story of what she would do to protect it. The maid's hands trembled slightly as she moved through the hidden passage she knew so well, a narrow corridor behind the library shelves that led to a small, abandoned room at the back of the mansion. She had discovered it months ago while dusting the old library, a forgotten space that no one had stepped into for years. It was empty, cold, and dark, but tonight it felt like a sanctuary. She placed the baby gently on the worn mattress, her fingers lingering a moment on the soft blanket, as if willing the child's tiny heart to slow, to find calm in the middle of the storm. Her mind wandered briefly to the family she served, the millionaire who had built his empire from nothing, and the young mother who had disappeared days ago under mysterious circumstances. The baby had arrived under circumstances she had never fully understood, wrapped in secrecy, and entrusted to her care by someone whose voice still echoed in her memory, a hurried whisper, a plea that filled her with both fear and resolve. She had promised to protect the child, a promise made silently in the quietest corner of the mansion, and she had kept it all this time. But tonight, the threat felt closer, sharper. The mansion, for all its grandeur, had always been a place of whispers and shadows. Staff members came and went, always careful not to notice too much, to speak too loudly. And yet, the deeper she got into her work, the more she realized that the walls themselves seemed to hold secrets. She remembered the strange occurrences over the past weeks, the soft tapping at windows when no one was outside, the faint glimmer of someone watching from the garden, the feeling that certain rooms had eyes of their own. She had learned to move carefully, to trust her instincts, but the cries of the newborn had shattered the fragile sense of safety she had built around herself. Her thoughts returned to the baby in her arms, to the weight of this life she now carried not just physically, but emotionally. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to run, to alert someone, anyone, but she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Whoever had tried to harm the child, whoever was moving through the mansion in silence, was still out there. She had seen the traces before. Footprints in the garden that didn't belong to anyone, doors left ajar that she hadn't touched, and the faint smell of someone who didn't belong. Fear mingled with determination in her chest, forming a tension she had never felt before. As she settled the baby, the sound of another movement made her freeze. A shadow crossed the hallway outside the hidden room, quick and fleeting, almost like it had come from nowhere. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath, every muscle taut. The mansion, with all its wealth and security, suddenly felt like a trap. One misstep could reveal her secret. One wrong move, and the baby she had sworn to protect could be taken away in an instant. She whispered softly to the infant, hoping the sound of her voice could anchor both of them to the moment, to safety that felt impossible. And as she listened, straining to hear any hint of the intruder, a thought struck her. She wasn't just protecting a child. She was protecting a future, a promise, a life that could unravel everything if it fell into the wrong hands. The mansion was no longer a place of comfort. It was a labyrinth of shadows, secrets, and danger. And in the center of it all, the maid realized she held the most fragile treasure of all. The next hours passed in a blur of tension and careful movements. The maid stayed in the hidden room, the baby nestled against her chest, every creak of the mansion making her jump. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the long windows along the corridor, carrying the sound of distant footsteps across the polished floors. She had no way of knowing whether it was the wind, a staff member moving late, or someone far more dangerous, someone who had come for the baby. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder that she could not falter, that she could not let fear control her. Meanwhile, downstairs in the grand hall, the millionaire sat in his study, unaware of the storm that had quietly erupted within his own home. He was a man used to control, to commanding boardrooms and navigating crises with precision. Yet, tonight, something gnawed at him, a feeling that everything he had built, everything he had fought for, was vulnerable in ways he could not yet see. He had received a cryptic message that morning, a note left by someone who signed only as a friend, warning him to be careful, to watch the household closely. He hadn't understood it fully at the time, dismissing it as a prank or a mistake. But now, in the silence of the night, he wondered if the warning had been more urgent than he realized. The maid's mind drifted back to the baby again, the tiny hands curling around hers, the soft whimpers that never seemed to stop. She had taken every precaution to hide the child from the world, but she knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. The mansion had always had eyes, even when she had thought she was alone. Cameras, hidden passages, and staff who were loyal but curious. Anyone could stumble across the secret. And what would happen if they did? The thought of the infant in danger sent chills through her, but she pushed it down, forcing herself to focus on the present, on keeping the child safe. At the same time, a subplot was quietly unfolding in the mansion's outer wings. One of the new security guards, young and eager, had been wandering the hallways, noticing odd details he hadn't before. He didn't yet know the truth, but his curiosity was growing, and the tension between following orders and following instinct began to build. He paused outside a door he didn't recognize, listening to faint muffled sounds inside. A chill ran down his spine, a mixture of fear and intrigue. But before he could knock or investigate further, a shadow moved behind him, and he spun around. Nothing there, only the echo of his own heartbeat. Back in the hidden room, the maid whispered softly to the baby, her voice barely more than a breath. She thought about the mother who had vanished, about the father who might never know what was happening in the silent corridors of his own mansion. She considered the possibilities. Was the danger coming from outside, from people who had watched the family for months, or from someone within, someone who knew the baby's value more than she did? Every scenario was terrifying, but she refused to let panic take hold. Every instinct she had honed over years of service, every quiet skill she had learned to navigate the mansion unnoticed, was now focused on protecting this tiny, fragile life. Outside, the storm raged harder, the wind carrying more than rain. It carried the sense of something unseen, of danger moving closer. The maid pressed the baby against her chest and listened intently, aware that at any moment, the delicate balance between safety and disaster could be shattered. And somewhere in the mansion, unseen but present, the forces that threatened the child were already in motion, closing the distance with every passing heartbeat. The storm outside had grown into a relentless force, the wind howling through the mansion as if warning of the chaos building within. Rain slammed against the tall windows, and the shadows in the hallways seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally. The maid clutched the baby tighter, her knuckles white, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring ready to snap. She could hear faint footsteps again. Closer this time, deliberate, careful, as though the intruder knew exactly where to look. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was sure the sound would betray her hiding place. Downstairs, the millionaire's unease had escalated into a gnawing fear. He walked from room to room, checking doors, peeking into corridors, feeling the emptiness of the mansion weigh heavily on him. His mind replayed the cryptic note from that morning over and over. Be careful. Watch your household closely. At first, he thought it was nothing. Now, he could feel the truth behind those words, a lurking threat that he couldn't yet see. His instincts screamed that something precious was at risk, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the baby, the newborn he barely understood, was at the center of it all. The young security guard, still wandering the upper halls, had begun to piece together strange patterns. The quiet absence of certain staff, doors that were never unlocked, rooms that seemed to exist only when no one was looking. He paused again outside the same hidden door, straining to hear the muffled whimpers that had drawn him here. The fear rising in his chest battled with curiosity, but before he could act, the lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into darkness. A loud crash echoed somewhere nearby, and the sound of hurried movement followed. His pulse raced. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew he was at the edge of something dangerous. Inside the hidden room, the maid's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. She had barricaded the door as best she could with old furniture, but the faint scratches against it would told her that it might not hold. The baby cried softly, and she whispered words of comfort she hoped would mask the terror in her own voice. She thought of the vanished mother, of the father who might never forgive himself if harm came to his child, and of the family's secrets buried deep within the mansion walls. Every sound, every shadow, every subtle shift in the storm felt like a countdown to disaster. The intruder's presence was now unmistakable. Footsteps approached with purpose, echoing to the halls, accompanied by the soft scrape of metal. Locks being tested, doors being probed. The maid's heart leapt into her throat. She had no weapon, no backup, only her courage, her instincts, and the fragile life in her arms. The baby whimpered again, a tiny, urgent sound that seemed to pierce the roar of the storm. She pressed herself against the wall, every nerve screaming to move, to hide, to survive. Suddenly, a shadow appeared beneath the crack of the door. The intruder was close, closer than ever, and the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. The mansion, once a place of comfort and wealth, had become a cage, and the maid knew that the coming moments would demand a choice she had never imagined. Every instinct, every decision she had made until now had led to this point. And now there was no turning back. The cries of the newborn, the relentless storm, the encroaching figure, all collided into a heartbeat of suspense. The mansion held its breath. The maid held her ground. And somewhere in the shadows, the forces threatening the baby's life were ready to strike. The climax, inevitable and unavoidable, was about to erupt, and nothing could stop it from changing everything. The shadow at the door paused, almost as if sensing the weight of the moment. The maid's heart raced faster than ever, her grip on the baby tightening instinctively. But just as she thought the danger was immediate and singular, a new, chilling reality hit her. There was more than one intruder. Footsteps multiplied, echoing from different directions, circling the hidden room with a deliberate, predatory rhythm. The mansion, with all its corridors and secret passages, had become a labyrinth of peril, and she realized that this was no ordinary threat. It was orchestrated. Her mind raced as she weighed her options. The baby's cries had grown louder, more urgent, and she knew that hiding would only delay the inevitable. She had to act, but every choice carried risk. Outside the hidden room, she could hear the metallic clink of something sliding along the polished floors. Locks, perhaps, or tools, or worse. The thought that someone in the house might have betrayed her added another layer of dread. She had trusted some staff for years, but now every familiar face, every soft step she had once ignored, felt suspicious. Someone had planned this, and she had unknowingly walked into a trap. Meanwhile, the young security guard was following the strange noises he had heard earlier. He had initially thought it might be a prowler or an intruder, but now he began to suspect something more sinister. As he moved cautiously to the hallways, he noticed details he had missed before. A door left slightly ajar where it should have been locked, faint smudges on polish where that weren't there earlier, and shadows that didn't belong to any living person he could see. A feeling of dread settled over him. The sense that the danger was closer than he realized, that someone was deliberately drawing him into a web of secrets. Back in the hidden room, the maid's eyes darted around. A gust of wind burst through the corridor outside, blowing open a window and scattering papers across the floor. The baby cried out, startled, and the sound seemed to draw attention immediately. She realized that whoever was outside might now be listening, following the sound of the infant. Her instinct screamed at her move, to find another hiding place, but there was no time, no safe exit. The mansion itself seemed to conspire against her. Every door she might use blocked or under surveillance. Every hallway leading back to danger. Then, the most unsettling twist revealed itself. A soft, familiar voice called her name from the hallway. Low, deliberate, and unmistakably human. Her breath caught. It was someone she had never expected. The billionaire himself, but not as an ally. His expression was hidden in shadow, but the intensity in his eyes made her question everything she thought she knew. Was he here to protect the child? Or was he another piece of the puzzle she had not yet understood? The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing the tension building inside the mansion. Shadows shifted. Footsteps grew nearer, and the weight of the newborn in her arms became both a comfort and a burden. Every second stretched unbearably. Every creak of the old mansion floorboards a reminder that the baby's life, and perhaps all their lives, hung in the balance. She realized with a sickening clarity that this night would not end as any of them expected. The hidden room, the intruders, the storm, and the unexpected presence of the millionaire converged into a single point of suspense. The stakes had risen far beyond anything she had anticipated. The baby's cries, the footsteps outside, the shadows moving with intent, all signaled that the climax of this terrifying night was imminent, and the truth behind the mansion's secrets was about to confront them all. The hidden room shook as the intruders finally forced the door open, their shadows spilling into the small space. The maid instinctively pressed the baby closer to her chest, her body shielding the child like a wall of steel. The sound of rain pounding against the window seemed to fade into silence as every eye locked on her, and she realized that the stakes were now life and death. The intruder stepped forward, but just as tension reached its peak, the billionaire appeared behind them, his presence commanding and sudden. He moved faster than anyone could anticipate, disarming the nearest figure in a swift, precise motion, and the other intruders froze. The maid's pulse raced, but she finally allowed herself to look up at him. For the first time, she saw the fear and determination mirrored in his eyes. "Get the baby to safety," he whispered urgently, his voice low and steady. She hesitated only a moment before following his lead, moving toward the other side of the room where a secret panel led to the service corridors she had always known. The intruders tried to pursue, but the billionaire intercepted, buying them precious seconds. The house, once a place of wealth and comfort, had transformed into a battleground, each room a trap and a testament to the maid's courage. The baby's cries filled the hidden passages, echoing like a warning, and the maid whispered soft, soothing words, her heart clinging to the fragile life she had sworn to protect. They moved through the corridors with urgency, narrowly avoiding detection, until they reached the study where the young security guard had been waiting, having pieced together the situation. Relief flashed across his face as he saw them, and together they barricaded the entrances, creating a small fortress within the mansion. The intruders were trapped temporarily, but the tension remained suffocating. Finally, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, the billionaire knelt beside the maid, his hands shaking slightly as he took the baby into his arms. "I didn't understand," he admitted, voice trembling. "I didn't realize the danger or the courage it would take to protect my child." The maid looked at him, her own fear giving way to exhaustion and relief. Months of secrecy, of vigilance, of quiet sacrifice had brought them to this moment. The newborn was safe, for now, but the mansion still held its shadows, and every creak reminded them that safety was fragile. Just as they began to breathe, a sound from the far hallway made them freeze, a quiet, deliberate tapping, slow and rhythmic. The intruders they had seen were gone, disarmed and trapped, but this noise was different. The maid's eyes widened as she recognized it, a sound she thought she'd never hear again. From the shadows emerged a young mother, pale and shaken, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and guilt. She had not vanished by accident. She had been hiding, watching, trying to protect the child in ways that even the maid had not imagined. The billionaire's gaze shifted between them, confusion and relief battling in his expression. You knew?" he asked, barely a whisper. The maid shook her head, understanding that the night's revelations had only begun. Someone else had orchestrated the danger. The mother's absence, the intruders, even the cryptic warning note were part of a plan they had yet to uncover. The baby cooed softly in the billionaire's arms, a small, innocent life at the center of a web of secrets. The storm outside was fading, but inside the mansion, the air was thick with questions, with tension, and with the undeniable realization that the night's terrors had only revealed the beginning of something far larger. And just as they began to process the shock, a faint clicking sound from the grandfather clock echoed through the hall, signaling that the mansion's deepest secret, one no one had expected, was about to make itself known. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed impossibly loud, echoing through the mansion like a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. The maid, the billionaire, the security guard, and now the mother stood frozen for a moment, each grappling with the layers of danger and deception that had unfolded over the night. But as the seconds stretched, the tension began to ease. The intruders had been contained, their plans unraveled, and the baby was finally safe in the arms of the man who had built a world powerful enough to protect anyone, if only it understood what true protection required. The mother stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "I thought I could hide from it all, from the people who wanted the baby," she admitted. Her eyes met the maid's, and in that glance, an unspoken bond passed between them. Months of secrecy, sacrifice, and courage had brought them here, and for the first time, they could share the truth. The maid nodded, a quiet smile breaking through her exhaustion. She had always known the child was precious, but she had not realized the full weight of the story, the danger that had shadowed every day and every night. The billionaire knelt beside them, holding the baby gently, his eyes filled with gratitude and awe. "You kept this child alive," he said to the maid, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just with courage, but with love. I failed to see what truly matters until tonight." The maid shook her head. "You didn't fail. We all did what we could. That's what matters." His hand rested briefly on hers, an acknowledgement of the bond that had carried them through the night. The security guard stepped forward, reporting quietly that the intruders had been handed over to authorities and that the mansion surveillance systems had captured every move. Justice, finally, would catch up with those who had threatened the newborn's life. As the storm outside softened into a gentle drizzle, the mansion seemed to exhale along with them. The night had been long, filled with fear and shadows, but the dawn brought a quiet sense of resolution. The mother held the baby close, whispering apologies and promises, while the billionaire vowed to never underestimate the fragility and strength of the life he now understood more than ever. And the maid, who had quietly carried the burden of responsibility, allowed herself a rare moment of rest, knowing her actions had changed the course of all their lives. In the following days, the mansion settled into a new rhythm. The baby thrived, surrounded by both protection and love. The security protocols were strengthened, and trust rebuilt in the household. Yet the memory of the night, The storm, the intruders, the shadows remained a reminder that courage often comes quietly from those who choose to act when no one else notices. The maid's loyalty and bravery had not only saved a life, but had revealed the true meaning of family, of sacrifice, and of the unseen heroes who walk silently beside us. The billionaire, once a man focused solely on wealth and power, learned a lesson that no amount of money could teach. That life's most precious treasures are not possessions, but the people we protect, the promises we keep, and the courage we show when no one is watching. The mother and the maid forged a lasting partnership, understanding that shared responsibility could protect even the most vulnerable. And the baby, innocent and untouched by the night's dangers, grew in a home now strengthened by love, vigilance, and a quiet heroism that had saved a life no one else could. In the end, the mansion no longer felt like a place of shadows. It was a place of hope, a sanctuary built not by walls or wealth, but by courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds of those willing to protect what truly matters. And as the sun rose over the sprawling estate, the first soft cries of the newborn were no longer a warning. They were a celebration, a testament to survival, and a promise that love, even in the darkest night, could prevail.